Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Walk and Talk, the dog training podcast that enables me to hitchhike along with you on your dog walk and bend your ear with juicy nuggets of wisdom designed to make life with your dog that little bit less stressful, a lot more enjoyable, and hopefully a lot easier to navigate. So this week, I thought I'd do a deep dive on possibly one of the most misreferenced, misquoted, misguided, I don't know exactly what you'd call it, areas of dog training, ideology, and behavioral research that actually takes the flak for most, if not all, of the old school, dominance based, alpha theory, dog training ideologies of the 80s and the 90s. And of course, they're still alive and kicking today in many pockets of the dog training industry. I know a lot of you will be familiar with, even if you don't advocate for this approach to living life alongside your dog, that's very much based on the idea of asserting your higher ranking status, for want of a better phrase, without repeatedly using the word dominant. But yeah, essentially, I want to break down where this school of dog training comes from, what its scientific origins are, because there are some, and then explore the path from there to the most modern correction of direction. And to be honest, not necessarily throwing the whole thing away, but making sure we really have a solid grasp on the nuances of where this helps us with our dogs and where it hinders. Which elements might be rooted in something useful and which are outright ridiculous, and how best to interpret all the wild little sound bites that get tossed at you on social media from a place of knowledge and understanding rather than feeling just constantly overwhelmed by different theories that seem to contradict one another, different trainers that appear to be in conflict with each other's ideas, and all of that confrontational jazz. Because even though that might sound complicated, ultimately it isn't. Once you understand where things have come from and why, you are armed with all the knowledge you need to make the very best choices for your dog. And that is obviously what I'm all about. So, to begin, let's go back to the beginning, or at least let's go back a good few decades to an era of dog training that was very much saturated with ideas like show your dog who's boss, don't let them walk in front of you, or the infamous alpha role, as was made famous by a certain TV dog trainer. Now, these concepts stem from the dominance theory or alpha theory, which is a phrase I'm sure you're familiar with and is essentially a model of canine behavior that we now know is rooted in outdated science and misapplied assumptions, because essentially when it came to the wolf studies that were basically the cornerstone research and reference for all of this, the science wasn't really sciencing, and I'm going to explain why. So the alpha concept originated from early studies on captive wolves that took place in the 40s, I think, maybe the 40s and 50s. And in particular, the work of a Swiss animal behaviorist called Rudolf Schenkel. Now, if you haven't heard of Schenkel when it comes to this theory, that's probably because it didn't really take off in a big way until the 70s, when a biologist called David Meach published his own works. And he, with his writing, he was citing the earlier research of Schenkel and the work Schenkel did with the wolves as the basis for the theories that he published. I hope that makes sense. So basically, remember, what Meach wrote is, first of all, not based on his own studies with wolves, but on the citation of earlier wolf studies by Schenkel that took place in the 40s. And second, I'm going to translate that study that took place on those wolves into human terms for you now so that you can get a grasp on how kind of ridiculous it was as a basis for the concrete conclusion, as it was presented at the time, of the alpha theory in dogs or even in wolves. So, okay, let's imagine a scientist visits 25 different countries and he plucks a human being from each of those different countries against their will, and he drops them all into a foreign, alien, and, an inescapable environment altogether that they don't recognize, they have no reference to, without any warning or explanation. Okay, so these human beings from all of these different countries, they share no language, they have no shared culture or community or social values, and they're inherently pretty traumatized by these recent events, right? So immediately, to me, this has far too much in common with the Hunger Games, yeah, to reasonably expect that these people are going to behave calmly, objectively, and civilly towards one another, but rather, much like the Hunger Games, it's incredibly likely with this scenario that I've just spelled out that there's going to be a massive display of stress-induced resource hoarding and aggression and probably violence. And this was exactly the situation that Schenkel's wolves found themselves in, and so that is exactly how Schenkel's wolves behaved. If aliens landed, let's say, in the center of this hypothetical human experiment that I've just set out and determined that normal human society and family relationships operated akin to what they saw before them there, I think it's safe to say that it would be in stark contrast to an alien landing in your family home, say, and observing how you normally engage with your children, your parents, your friends on a day-to-day basis. And this is exactly what Meach went on to discover over the next 40 years of researching wild wolves in their natural habitat, as opposed to this stressful faux setup that Schenkel had. Because later in Meach's career, in the 13 years he spent studying a single wolf pack structure, not once did he ever observe a single contest of dominance. It's like the difference between trying to deduce normal social behavior from observing social interactions in a family home, like I said before, versus observing social interactions in a prison block, say. And the results were in such stark contrast to the original study that even Meach himself refuses to use the term alpha anymore. He cites that wolves are actually familial. So they live in social structures similar to our own, with parents and their young living in these cooperative groups in which there is actually no contest of rank. And when a litter of wolf pups matures, there will not be dominance battles, but rather just the natural dispersal of those pups to find mates of their own and subsequently form a family pack of their own, led by the new parents, in the same way that we as human parents lead and raise our young. So next time someone recommends to you that you walk through every doorway before your dog so that he knows who's boss, because that's what happens in the wild, just ask them how many doorways they think there actually are in the wild, because this knowledge is not founded in real social behavior taking place in genuine animal environments. And so I hope you can see, having it presented like that, how it's pretty fundamentally flawed. So now that we've cleared up the misguided foundations of the alpha theory for dogs, I think this is where it's really important to highlight something that is both glaringly obvious and yet wildly overlooked whenever we reference any kind of canid behavioral research and attempt to relate it to the lives that we live with our domesticated dogs today. And that is this: dogs are not wolves. This strange little creature that we have created to live in our homes and walk around the block with us, attached by a piece of rope, and sleep under the pub table and be served 2 square meals a day in a bowl and go to the salon once every 6 weeks and whatever else you do with your dog. These domesticated dogs evolved alongside humans for tens of thousands of years. They've been bred to bond with us, to understand us, and to work with us. And as a result, they live inside a completely different social construct to wolves. And here's a key truth that I think is so important for all dog owners to hear today. So be ready to absorb this one, okay? Most so-called dominant, in inverted commas, behavior in dogs is actually just normal, unmet needs, or stress-based behavior. For example, a dog who pulls on the lead isn't trying to lead the pack. It's honestly so much simpler than that. They just want to get somewhere. And nobody's taught them yet how to walk nicely. Nobody's made it more reinforcing to that dog to walk to a heel than it is to drive forwards towards a perceived reinforcer out there ahead of them, like that other dog across the road, or that old KFC wrapper on the ground that smells amazing, or their favourite park that they know they're going to. Also, as obvious as I feel like this is, but I'm going to say it anyway, dogs walk faster than us. So if in some alternative universe there is a world where I'm trying to think of something slow, let's say tortoises or snails keep human beings as pets and they take us out on a lead every day to stretch our legs, we'd probably end up pulling on that lead too. In the same way, a dog who jumps up to greet you isn't being disrespectful or attempting to dominate you. They are excited. They're having big feelings and they don't know what else to do. So when we then choose to respond to these moments with anything from the dominance theory school of instruction, like physical intimidation or manipulation of comfort or space or any of this stuff, we're not really creating a happy, well-behaved dog. We're just shaping a confused and increasingly anxious one. Because what actually happens when you resort to something like an alpha role or any of the other techniques that stem from this theory that I won't list is that you may well stop a behavior in the moment, but you won't have delivered any valuable long-term learning because you're actually just suppressing communication in the moment, which is wildly dangerous, by the way, because a dog who is worried, unhappy, or afraid has a clearly defined and understood ladder of communication they will use to convey this. And there's plenty of behaviors at the bottom of that ladder that you can respond to that won't get you hurt. And you can de-escalate and diffuse if you spot those behaviors. But if you shut that communication system down without identifying or in any way dealing with the root cause of your dog's issue, your dog's later stage, higher up the ladder, communicators are the ones that get people seriously hurt. So putting a dog into shutdown is never ever a good idea. It resolves nothing long term, and short term, it will either diffuse a moment in time or it will rapidly turn what didn't need to be a dangerous situation into a dangerous situation. And you won't know which way it's going to go until it's gone there. Do you know what I mean? And now you've positioned yourself as an adversary instead of a teammate as well. And that's a dynamic I would never want to design with any kind of animal that I'm sharing my home with. So where it gets interesting from here, and by interesting, I mean slightly irritating, is that the dog training world now forks in two directions when really there is a third path. So you have the people who ascribe to the alpha, pack leader, dominance. My dog eats after me and washes my feet and worships me like a god. And then on the flip side, you have the people who reject this concept so strongly that they sort of end up in this weird space of actually giving their dog no direction, no boundaries, no leadership, no guidance. And life for them just becomes a bit of a chaotic free for all where, spoiler alert, the dog isn't really much happier because the truth is there is a middle path. It's like we've come a long way from the Victorian era where children were beaten for speaking out of turn and disciplined abhorrently, but we still know that letting our kids just eat candy floss for breakfast and choose their own bedtimes and never go to school, that isn't what's best for them either. They still need guidance and structure and boundaries, and dogs are exactly the same. Dogs absolutely do benefit from boundaries. They thrive with structure and they need clear communication and consistency. But none of that requires being dominant. It's not dominance that we need to prioritize, it's guidance. So, what does a healthy and beneficial approach to guidance and leadership look like when it comes to dog ownership? Well, it encompasses understanding your dog's needs. So that's their physical needs, their emotional needs, their social needs, their cognitive needs. It means meeting those needs proactively so problematic behaviors don't arise. It absolutely includes creating clarity through consistent feedback and communication. And that communication doesn't need to involve pain or fear. We've already proved it. We've taught dogs to do pretty much anything and everything you could want a dog to do without pain and fear already. It also means offering security. So your dog knows that they can trust you in uncertain situations. And generally, being a safe, confident anchor in your dog's world, which don't forget is basically just your world that you just expect your dog to mold themselves into, and not just being a force to fear or obey blindly. Dominance is based in fear, it's based in control and coercion, whereas leadership is based in trust. It's based in open communication and it's based in safety. So, how do we make sure we're doing this right going forward? Here are some clues that you are embracing modern evidence based training that is truly going to deliver the best life for you and your dog long term. Okay, number one, positive reinforcement is your go to for training. What does that mean? Basically, you reward what you want to see more of. It's not complicated. Number two, antecedent arrangement is where you begin when it comes to teaching anything new or tackling a problem behavior. I've talked about this in an older episode. What does it mean? Basically, you set the dog up to succeed by shaping the environment that they're working in at the beginning. Number three, you have clear communication systems. What does that mean? It means that you use markers. You've taught your dog some verbal cues and you give him consistent feedback so he knows what's going on. Number four, you do not sidestep your dog's enrichment and fulfillment. Why? Because you fully appreciate that a mentally, physically, and emotionally satisfied dog behaves better. That's not news, is it? And number five, you have a working understanding of your dog's stress and arousal levels. So you are able to recognize when your dog can't learn and you can adjust your expectations accordingly. Ultimately, dog training isn't really about control, it's about collaboration. And I think it's so much more fun and fulfilling and exciting to build a partnership with this animal that you've chosen to spend the next decade or more of your life with than it is to just beat them into submission. I just don't see the appeal of that. So I hope that this episode has been useful and or interesting. And if you want to go and read any more about Meech and his work, he has his own website, I believe, which I think is just davemeech.com or davemeech.org. Be aware, however, that the spelling, his surname is spelled Mech, so it looks like mech, but apparently it's pronounced Meech. And yeah, on his website, you can find out more about his research and the chronology of the works that he's published over the years. Fascinating stuff if you are a dog and or wolf nerd. But for now, I've probably nerded out for long enough. So as always, if you have any questions or comments about this week's podcast, you can always come and find me on TikTok or Insta at Listen Dog Training. Or if you would like any guidance or support with training your own dog, you can check out my website, which is listendogtraining.com, for a wealth of online training packs and programs and planners and everything designed to help you tackle problem behaviors and live your very best life with your dog by your side. But for now, I will let you enjoy the rest of your walk, and I'll see you at same time next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.